Today we're taking a look at a very interesting and attacking opening called the Evans Gambit. Have you ever played it before and
Oh
would you like
my
to learn it?
gosh. That is interesting. Okay. I haven't played it myself, although I would be the perfect example. Many people also suggested it back then to me that I should play it. I played against it and I lost terribly. I
Hmm.
think I played against it twice. It is it was quite common in the 90s, 2000s in the club niveau I was playing for. So I don't know if it's completely rebutted or if it got even a little better. I have no idea. I'm very, very curious. Excellent. Okay.
Yeah, sure. So it starts with the move e4. Black responds e5, knight f3, knight c6, bishop c4, and bishop c5, and now b4. This is the starting position of the Evans Gambit. C3 would lead to regular Italian positions, which we also looked at some of them in some previous lessons,
Hmm.
but today we'll really look into this b4 move. This gambit was named after a player called William Davis Evans, and he was the first player known to have played it in the 19th century. And now this opening still gets used, and it has been played by many top players and world champions, although mostly as a surprise weapon for them. But I do think that it's a good opening for many levels, maybe as a surprise, maybe as a more an opening you play a bit more often, but it's a very fun opening with lots of attacking ideas.
Well, for the least, I have to say it is very, very good to know how to also play against it, just in case somebody wants to surprise you with this opening, which happened to me too. So, if black knows its stuff, I think it is good. And if black doesn't know how to deal with it, I mean, the first question I have, but you will get to all of this, is like, can you just like decline it and not even take the pawn?
Yeah, you can, of course. So you could, for example, retreat with the bishop, something like this, in which case, as white, you would try to defend the pawn and then defend the other pawn and castle, put the bishop onto b2, and white has little problems out of the opening.
I
So
see.
that's if the bishop goes here. Maybe the bishop can also go to b6, which is a bit more natural, in which case you would castle. And then already, if black continues normal development, then you could start attacking the knight and start taking the pawn here.
I see.
So here it's just important to know to not take on f7 because that's a bit of a trick that black has.
Oh.
If you take, black is going to be better in this position because it's tough to defend both pieces. And taking with a knight f7 is met with d5. So just instead of this, knight retreats back to f3, everything's safe. The e file is going to belong to white if black ever wins this pawn back.
Mhm.
But yeah, it's a fairly good position here, and you would win back this pawn on e5
I
after.
see. So it is perhaps even suggested to take it and just defend very well or try to counter the
Yeah,
initiative. Okay.
exactly. So yeah, that's what happens if black doesn't accept that pawn. And instead, the main focus is bishop to b4. This is the main line, but knight b4 basically transposes to one of the lines that we're going to look at. So
Okay.
it's it's going to transpose no matter what into one of these bishop to b4 lines. And now c3 is the move. So the point of White's whole gambit is to take quick control of the center and play c3 and quick d4. That's the whole idea of the Evans Gambit, and to gain some tempi doing that by sacrificing that pawn.
Hmm.
And now after c3, as the player with a black piece, is where would you retreat?
Yeah, that's the big question, right? I think, I don't know. I mean, bishop c5 seems legit, but question is if bishop a5 is also possible. So I'm seeing some, I don't know. I mean, bishop E7? That's a bit too passive.
You just named the three existing
Ah,
moves. That's right.
okay.
So the most of the lines go either bishop a5, bishop to c4, or bishop e7. Maybe let's start with bishop to c5. This one, I wouldn't say it's very natural because you kind of don't want to get attacked by d4 one more time. But still, it's a line and it exists, it's possible. So after d4, black takes, white takes, and now if the bishop to b4 check, which we often see in other Italian lines, then the knight just calmly goes to d2. And these lines are generally, I would say, pretty good for white,
Hmm.
just with clear piece development. Of course, down a pawn, but after the queen goes to b3, you kind of attack the b7 pawn. They have to spend some time doing that. So it's, yeah, it's a bit of a matter of time and getting a strong center. And I would say that white has really good initiative there. And if bishop to b6, this is very similar to these Italian positions, but white just has a little bit of an extra development for that pawn. And oftentimes you have to be really careful with of how to develop with black. For example, here already the right move is knight a5, which I don't think is a move that you would always play if you see this position for the first time. Let's say knight to f6 positions are not as good because there's this bishop a3 idea, which is a bit tough to see from afar as well. But it's a very good way to prevent castling. Then the rook goes to e1, and already the threats, some bigger threats, can be created in such a position.
That's massively annoying, bishop a3.
Yeah.
I dealt with that too in the loss I had.
Hmm. Yeah, so even like a move like knight a5 would be the better way to counter it, and then trying to go for the d4 pawn, and white can sacrifice it as well and try to have compensation in this form, where the knight is a little stuck, everything is developed, and maybe white will figure out some breakthrough in the near future if black doesn't castle anytime soon.
Hmm.
So something like this has compensation, but also black has to find all of these moves in a row and not get caught into something like bishop a3, like in that line. So we just dealt with kind of bishop to c5, but I would say most people play either bishop e7 or bishop a5. So bishop e7 is the second in popularity, and in these lines, the main focus is going to be the f7 pawn. So we often pair the queen and the bishop there, but first, of course, d4. This is basically always the follow-up
Okay.
to these positions. Now, there's many things that black can do, and maybe I'll go over like each of them for a bit, not too deeply,
Hmm.
but basically all of these responses are very common. There's just something logical that somebody would do, either if they're prepared against it or if they're not. I feel like a lot of these moves you can just come up with. But for instance, things like d6 already put black into a bit of trouble because of queen b3. And it's tough to find a way to defend that pawn because this bishop is kind of preventing this queen's access to that square. Knight h6 is never working. And well, how else would you defend it? You would just need to deal with things like knight to a5, in which case the important idea to know is that you take that pawn and then you play queen to a4. So just a way to attack
Oh,
that
okay.
knight, and then, you either exchange it for the bishop or you retreat the bishop on the next move. But something like this, if you can ever win the f7 pawn and then win that knight on a5 back, usually that's the way to do it.
Hmm.
Black can definitely play knight a5 right away. This is the theory move, so this is technically one of the best moves, but I would say that that move is also very hard to find yourself because this knight a5, but it's good. It's a good idea to know for black. Like you said, if you're trying to counter that gambit, just knowing this idea can be helpful. And then knight e5, basically white regains the pawn, and black is going to be okay after something like d5. But at the same time, I would say white also has a pretty pleasant position. They've just developed. Now they're not lacking a pawn, so it's going to be a more balanced game after this trade. And
Okay.
oftentimes, I would say, in my experience playing it, a lot of people play something like knight to f6, which is usually a natural move, but in a lot of these Evans Gambit lines, it's not the best because that knight just gets into trouble after something like that. And here, the trouble is that queen to d5 once again attacks that f7 pawn, and then the knight just has to retreat. And honestly, the position says that it's not so bad. It's only slightly better for white, but it looks fairly bad to have that knight on h6 and to have to worry about that for the rest of the game.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, yeah, bishop taking on h6 is always like on my mind, but
Yeah,
probably just leave the knight there for now, I guess. Makes
it says
sense.
castle is a better move, but I totally get just taking that knight
Yeah.
on h6. It's I think the most natural move in that position. So then the final line that I just want to look at a bit is taking here.
Hmm.
And the reason why it's that you don't always take back. So in the bishop c5 line, we took back. It was with a tempo. But here we'll actually play this queen b3 line right away
Hmm.
to put immediate pressure onto f7. So once again, basically the only way that black can deal with it is knight a5.
That's so hard
And
to. So this knight a5 move is just really like that's you have to know that, right? You have to really know that as black, otherwise you are in trouble, and it's hard to see. It's
yeah,
hard
yeah,
to
you might
immediately
find
spot.
that out of not having anything else to do, but I would say it looks really dangerous
Yeah.
to do that. And to leave your king to be like this. But as white, you also need to know this queen to a4 move
Yes.
to renew that attack on the piece and not lose it. And if something like c6 defending that knight, well, then the bishop is happy to retreat, maybe to b3, and then, have a pretty attacking position here with the king stuck on f8 for at least the next part of the game, and you'll have chances to attack it there. And if king here, then queen takes on a5, and here there's some ideas related to queen d5, queen f5, and combined with e5. Maybe the knight can join the game with an extra check. But yeah, definitely black also has things to play for, but most of the time the Evans Gambit either it has a couple of traps, but the main thing is to get just an attacking position out of the opening, which you won't always predict how it's going to go, but in some of these theoretical lines, you can kind of set yourself up for it. So yeah, that was bishop to e7.
Hmm.
So anything you want to ask before we move to the main line?
I was just curious, but then I can ask you at the end. But now I'm
Okay.
asking you directly. Have you ever faced the Evans Gambit in a classical game?
I've played it myself in a
Oh,
classical game,
really?
but I haven't played e5 enough. I've played it quite a bit, but I haven't played it enough, I guess, to face the Evans Gambit yet.
Wow, funny. Okay,
Yeah.
but you played it yourself. That's even
Yeah.
makes it more special. How cool. Okay, let's continue.
So bishop to a5 is the main move, and this is the move kind of with the most complications, but it's also a pleasant one for white. So we go with d4, and now there's a few things that black can do. We've mentioned that knight f6 is sometimes played, but it's also not the greatest move because of taking here. And in this case, the bishop is no longer on e7, so bishop to g5 is really an option. So this is really not good for black. It's basically more or less a winning position
Hmm.
with, of course, some work to be done, but just very, very good king safety wise. And there's other options like knight e7. Usually this is the better place for the knight in these lines. Not too obvious, but I guess if you realize that knight f6 is not great, this is where you would go. And in that case, d5 can happen, and this knight also doesn't have better squares, and then you can safely win back that pawn, which for me,
Nice.
I really like winning pawns back in gambits because then that means I have the initiative, plus the pawn is back. So just makes me feel really good whenever that happens.
Hmm.
So yeah, position like that, of course, there's no huge advantage. It would be roughly equal, but I would say it psychologically feels good to win that pawn back, and you still have attacking ideas with moves like the arrows that could follow up next. Okay, the other lines are going to be a bit bigger, I think. So d6 is one of the common moves, and then we'll move on to e takes d4 as the main line. So d6, in this case, once again, we always try to go after that pawn. And in these lines, there's no knight a5, which is nice for us, but also there's this e7 square, so the queen can always protect it. So the bishop is not no longer there, so protecting this pawn is now a little bit easier. There's a
Uh-huh.
few ways to protect it, actually. There's bishop, queen e7, queen d7, queen f6. Queen f6 is the only bad one. So this is a
Bishop.
mistake due to d
Ah.
and queen a4. So really worth it to remember
Ah.
this idea because people have gotten into this trap many, many times, especially in blitz, sometimes maybe even in classical, but especially in blitz. There's so many times that you can get that piece on a5 because you just forget to think about that. But the main move is queen to d7. I know it looks weird, so maybe some people will not come up with this and they'll play queen to e7 instead. But the point is that you still have these d5 ideas with queen a4 check. And yeah, if the knight retreats anywhere, then queen to a4. But knight d4 is sort of a nice resource that they have. And after this, um, the important thing to know is that this is the only line where you cannot play, well, you can play queen a4, but this is sort of black's trap, is that actually black is winning after d3.
What?
So this is the only time you wouldn't take that piece.
That is so crazy. What a line.
Yeah, that's true. So that one is just important to know, but otherwise you can always castle. Now the threat is renewed, so they have to go back, and then yeah, we just keep up the position like this with good development, good bishops, um, and and so on.
How
So
crazy.
not we don't have to go that deeply into all the lines, but just that little trap was is good to know.
Hmm.
Usually you can take that piece and you're just, you're just up a piece, but just worry about your king safety and if that queen is on e7. However, the main move is queen to d7 to prevent all of this from happening, to not have this queen to a4 check bother black. So in that case, you castle, and for example, if knight f6, once again, black is already in some trouble after d takes e5, and if takes then rook to d1, it's actually very bad for black already, with all the pieces joining the game. So black has to know a move like bishop to b6 to actually stay, to keep up some threats as well. In which case bishop to b5 is the move. We keep the bishop on that diagonal. We threaten d5 in some cases. And here the important move is queen to b2 because b5 is sort of black's only defense. And in this position can be tough for black because you kind of d5 seems almost unavoidable,
Hmm.
but they do have this bishop to a7, nice saving move. I think I once played a game like that, and the opponent at first looked so scared that there's no defense against d5, and then they found this bishop to a7 move, and I was
And
like, dang
looked
it.
completely relieved. It's like, oh,
Yeah, oh, there was
oh,
bishop to a7
oh.
there. So yeah, in that case, you have to play queen to b2 to sort of have the retreat for the bishop, and then the position goes on with some ideas for white in the center, some ideas with a4, and yeah, just trying to keep up. This is not the most attacking position, but you still have very good compensation and some ideas
Hmm.
to go off of to try to start an attack in the future. So that's the d6 and the queen d7 line, which once again, I don't think is the most obvious unless black has looked at this before. But that's one of them. So now the main line, e takes d4. And this is kind of the heart of the Evans Gambit.
Okay.
Now, castling is the most popular move, but after some of my own analysis, I thought that queen to b3 is a bit more direct and forcing, and it transposes into basically the same lines anyway, but I just like starting with queen to b3 instead.
Interesting.
And now there's lots of lines for black. Usually, they can, well, not lots actually, only two if they want to actually defend this pawn. Queen e7 or queen f6. And now the queen f6, you might not realize this right away, but this is there's a few lines that black can play. They can take here, they can play bishop to b6, they can play knight e7, and I'll have all of them in the analysis as well. But the if I had to highlight one line, which is what I want to do in this lesson, is it would be this d3 line. And the reason why is because this
D3.
gave rise to the Evergreen game. Do you
Oh my
One of the most famous games of all time.
goodness. Yes, Anderssen.
It came from this Evans Gambit. And I'll
How
just quickly
cool.
show how it went
Yeah,
because it really was a phenomenal game. Definitely, there were some inaccuracies for both sides and everything. So I'll have it in the analysis if anybody actually wants to take a look at it. But this knight f6 move um, was pretty nice to open up the e file, even though it wasn't the most correct way to go. And after all of this, there was this amazing rook takes e7, knight takes e7. And do you remember what the move was here?
oh wait, it's the other evergreen. Yes, sorry, I mixed it up.
The thing
Was
is, it
it?
was Anderssen, so I guess you remembered.
Yeah,
You
yeah,
rem
yeah, yeah, but yeah, he had like a couple of insane games. So queen
yeah.
takes d7, right?
Yes, this is the move
Yeah.
that made the game famous because it was a really nice queen sacrifice, and checkmate followed like this, which is not a checkmate that you see every day,
No.
and where white is also one move away from checkmating, from being checkmated themselves. So
So
yeah,
this
that's
opening has a lot of historical value, because also because of that. That's not.
yeah, I would say this is probably the most famous game that's been played in that opening. But yeah, other lines exist. Maybe I'll just show you the knight e7 one, after which you would take on d4, and it's worth it to know that black taking more pawns is usually not a good idea. Of course, it's you can't always give up pawns for free like that, but most of the time I would say it's pretty safe to say that black shouldn't take those pawns. So instead they
Hmm.
should try to castle, after which you have a very strong center, you keep the game going, you keep developing, and you try to find some tactics that could be on your side, basically. Something. Something like that, let's say, and try to create some tactics if you don't see any that work immediately.
Mm-hmm.
So that's queen f6, but I would say the position that you'll see the most is this queen e7, and probably if you play the Evans Gambit, this will be the position that you play the most often, with the queen defending it like that. Now, white castles, and there's once again many moves for black, and I don't want to be repetitive, but each of them has some of these subtleties. So maybe we'll just look at a couple.
Mm-hmm.
So knight f6, I would say, is the most natural looking moves, but it's also very easy to get into trouble whenever white has such a strong center and black's knights are right there ready to be attacked. So once again, d6, there's always trouble with the bishop. First, you can play e5 to take away that square from the knight, and then play this and try to win that piece. So here
Ah,
it's pretty safe, even despite the knight to c2 maneuver, because there's this nice bishop to a3 move, and something like that is just very good
wow.
for the black king. So just d6. Remember that there's always trouble there.
But it look at
But
it. It's rough because it looks so supernatural to play d6.
yeah, it is natural. Um, so black can also take this one, and it's actually pretty safe to take this pawn. But once again, you have to sort of be a bit more precise with that. And there's bishop to d3 here. Basically, it's always annoying that this bishop is preventing us from going to e1, but unfortunately, it is preventing. There's not much to do. And positions like these, you're down to pawns, but there's also a lot of initiative. And in this particular case, there's also queen to a4, which wins back the piece. And black might end up sacrificing it with knight to f2. And this is the only non-losing move for black, actually.
Poof.
But it does lead to a pretty good position after this, with really good bishops, really good attack coming up. But of course, you have to be a bit more precise when the king is not the safest like that. Then there's also d takes c3. At least personally with these gambits, I really like when black takes even more pawns because that just helps the development. And positions like these are fairly good. Um, I would say very easy for white to play, especially with this bishop to a3, really annoying idea, and e5. White should be much better in such a case.
Hmm.
And if anything, win back these pawns, and then black will also not be able to castle. So then maybe one final move, the one that is the main move that we'll look at, is bishop to b6. So now there's not as many ideas of how to win that bishop, and the bishop is just protecting the d4 pawn to prevent white from having such a strong center. But in this case, we still take. Now
Uh-huh.
it's important to know that um, only the knight taking is good for black. If the bishop takes, then white is actually going to be much better. But there is one detail here, is that knight c3, and after knight to e5, you shouldn't play queen to e2, which looks like the most normal move. You're still fine if you do that, but queen to g3 is the much better move to
Uh-huh.
right away attack on this square. So yeah, or well, not even just on this square, but actually knight to d5 is a big threat.
That's the reason, because yeah, only taking on
Yeah.
this square would not
Only taking here
make
is
it
not is
for
not gonna
me.
do
Yeah.
much. It's just nice.
Yes.
It's just nice. Maybe knight d5 first, and then see if you want to take this
Yeah.
or that. So yeah, that's important to know that not queen e2 there. But other than that, knight takes to d4 is the main move. And if black knows this, that's okay. We'll take that knight. We'll play knight to c3, and this is, I would say, a critical moment. Can you find black's only okay move? Basically, everything else would put them into more trouble.
Oh dear. Everything else.
Yeah.
Oh gosh. Well, that cannot be. I mean, again, d6 looks massively natural.
Yeah. D6 is not the good move though, because
Yeah.
of rook to d1. And then something like this, you don't want to trade queens, right? So you play this, and you can even sacrifice this rook.
What?
Yeah. Take on g8, and the point is that this queen is trapped, and of course black gets two rooks for it, but the rooks are really uncoordinated.
Yeah.
So that's kind of the key to these positions. Plus, the queen and bishop can be a good attacking duo.
Looks strong for
So this is
white.
winning for white. But yeah, after d6, there's rook d1 with much better
So
chances.
that doesn't help. Oof, what else does help? I mean, I'm. Oof. Gee, what helps? I don't know. Mm, maybe b5? No, it's stupid.
Yeah, d5 doesn't work. Um,
Yeah,
basically,
I even said b5, which is
oh,
10
b5,
times
okay.
worse. Okay.
Hmm.
No, I don't know what black can do here for
It's
now.
just knight f6. It's
I
not like a strange move or
considered
anything,
it, but I
but
thought like there's something.
yeah, knight f6 is often, has been a bad move in some
Yeah.
of these lines. But here it's kind of necessary to, not have knight d5 happen so quickly.
Hmm.
So this is the only move that I would say is fine. Everything else sort of has a lot more complications to it for black to deal with. So this is here we react with bishop to a3, very common idea as we see here, and after d6,
Now
rook
d6.
d1, a position like that can will be played from now on. Black still has a lot of traps to decode, like that he's not able to take this pawn because of this, and this endgame is actually fairly bad. It's in fact it's losing because of this pressure on the long diagonal and combined with f4. So the king cannot move, the bishop cannot move, and white ends up having the upper hand here
Rough.
because he cannot defend against these two threats at the same time. But if black finds all of these moves and then finds queen a5, then we just keep playing this position. we have a nice bishop there, but usually I've played some things like this in Blitz where you take on f6, and then a position like that, I would say is, of course, you can start winning the pawns with back with queen to c7, but I would say it's pretty simple to win these pawns, and it's usually not a concern. And usually you're able, if you're able to do some interesting rook lift, that could start an attack on the king as well.
Hmm.
So maybe it won't be in exactly this same way, but just in general, these pawn structures can sometimes happen in the Evans Gambit. And against these pawn structures, just know that some rook lifts are good and that you usually sort of prevent black's pieces from developing because you will already have pressure on these pawns with your own pieces.
Hmm.
But yeah, that was um, basically most of the Evans Gambit. Of course, there's ways to look into it even more, but I think that sort of gives an overview of how to play it, what are some ideas against it, and what type of positions you can get.
Excellent. Was very enjoyable. I noticed so very recently I was looking at your surprising openings, your 60 minutes video,
Hmm.
because I was teaching one of the openings to the chess club I'm with, and it was the Scotch Gambit. And
Hmm.
there are some similarities, of course, with the two
Yes.
bishops lining up against the king side. So yeah, there's a couple of plans and patterns which I
Hmm.
recognize, and that is interesting because, of course, the more different openings you learn, the more you will recognize some ideas, some plans, some patterns, and all of that. And I think this generally helps you to get a little bit better. Although it might
Yeah.
not be fun in the first place to learn something new because it's always a bit of work, but it is,
Mhm.
I guess it's worth it. Thank you so much,
Yeah.
Svetlana.